I'm here today with Christopher Hicks, Senior Partner of Hicks Adams LLP. We're talking today about the federal government's new accord with the Supreme Court of Canada, created to strengthen the independence of the court. Christopher, the federal government has created this accord. What were the main drivers behind the creation of the accord?
Well, it's open to speculation, Jennifer. There was no crisis that had to be resolved that anybody knows about. I think maybe the best guess would be it was just a changing of the guard. Chief Justice McLaughlin, Beverly McLaughlin, had been the chief for decades, and now there was a new regime.
The accord makes special note of funding for the Supreme Court. What's the significance of that?
Although it's an accord, it's not a contract, it's not anything to be sued on. It's the most that could happen is the Supreme Court could say, well, we'll use moral suasion if something went wrong, and say to any government, well, we have this accord and here's what it says. But money is very much the heart of what's going on here, and that's a key part for the independence of any court, especially the ultimate appellate tribunal in the country.
In your opinion, does the accord go far enough with respect to both the funding issue and perhaps the independence of the court?
Well, it keeps the court, and particularly the Chief Justice, away from the very sketchy subject of money. And all that power is vested in the registrar, and the Chief Justice has a tremendous amount of influence about who will be Chief Registrar of the court and how long he or she will continue to be registrar. There's a 5-year term, but there's also provision for terminating this position if the Chief Justice thinks it's in the best interest of the court to do that. So that's a very important position. I think, it opens a conversation now. The presentation of the registrar, this newly empowered registrar, will be very interesting when he or she goes to the Minister of Finance and says, here's what the court needs, and here's why they need it. The minister can listen and make suggestions, but in the final analysis, Section 6 says the registrar could just send the budget request on to the Minister of Finance and the Treasury Board, no matter what the Minister of Justice says about it. And that's quite a power. That's really something.
Do you think the accord went far enough? So we've talked about the funding issue. Are there other areas you would have seen you'd like to see it go further?
Here's the real problem for the Supreme Court of Canada and other federal tribunals. It's, where did you come from? The selection process is opaque. It's not at all transparent. And a former Minister of Justice and a very well-known Montreal lawyer, a decade or so ago, Erwin Kotler, said, the selection process is scandalous, and it has not improved. We don't know where these people came from. We don't know how they're vetted. We don't know anything about them until they're presented to us in robes. Someone's going to have to talk about it soon. This accord was probably not the place. The selection process is would be quite different kettle of fish from this accord. But this has to be talked about. We have to know more. There are two levels of courts in Canada. One is federally appointed, and one is provincially appointed. As it exists now, the provincial appointments are a model of how to appoint a judge. The Judicial Appointment Advisory Committee is wonderfully transparent compared to the federal model. And the federal model has to change. It just has to change because that's independence too. That's a key factor of independence. If we don't know where you came from, how do we know that your selection was independent and that you therefore are independent?